Today we're back with another BBB series, this time between Butcherbird and Hadriz, both players I'm familiar with since Warhammer 2 times. Hadriz in particular, who's going to be playing the Dark Elves and the away team in this series. Definitely a great dude. Played and hung out with him quite a bit over the years. Warhammer 2 and a little bit in Warhammer 3 as well. Life these days keeps me a little bit busier, where I don't get to, hang out on Discord, chat with the great players that play this game as much as I would like to, but we'll hopefully get back to it relatively soon. Last few months have been busier than I anticipated, but I'm certainly grateful for this BBB tournament to continue to provide me quality land battle replays to show you guys, because it has been quite a bit of fun to see this tournament unfold and kind of do a heat check on the land battle meta, so to speak. And this time we have two factions that are, again, Dark Elves we've known for some time are very good. Hadriz in particular has been very good with Dark Elves for a long time as well, so I'm quite excited to see this. Butcherbird, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is a Beastmen main, and Beastmen are also a faction that has been doing very well in a recent patch. I saw an XMT member, I don't remember, was it Dog Person? Someone won a Domination single faction tournament very recently with Beastmen, which is just incredible. I mean, there are definitely patches in the game where the Beastmen were far down on the tier list, but right now, between Minotaurs and many other aspects of their roster, they're looking pretty strong, so I'm excited for this battle. We've got Malagor up in the air, two Feral Manticores, and some Centaurs with throwing axes. Yeah, some regular Centaurs as well, including the Regiment of Renown. We've got Ungor Spears through the center, and that's pretty much it. I mean, just a mix of all of those in great numbers. Malekith going to be leading the Dark Elves, got some handbows and some Scourge Runner Chariots doing some nice skirmishing. Two Masters on their Dark Horses, which is really interesting to see. Not something you see super often. These anti-large armor-piercing heroes got great defense, not the best attack, but with that 55 charge, they can definitely get it going. With Murderous Prowess active, they'll also get a nice power spike, obviously. Dark Riders backing everything up, and it's going to be a little bit of a kite game for Hadriz here as he just continues pouring in fire. Smart of Butcherbird, though, to just take the damage on the Ungor Spears as much as possible. They are the cheapest unit here, and they've got shields, so they can negate a lot of that bow fire and just absorb the damage. That being said, they are relatively squishy, and I don't know if they'll even necessarily beat combat, the handbows in melee combat, rather. So, let's see how they do. Getting close as they make this advance under bow fire. Handbows are fast enough that they can stay out in front of Beastmen, unlike what we saw with Nurgle. What was that, yesterday probably when you were watching this? A couple days ago? I don't know exactly. But anyway, yeah, 40 speed on those handbows, so they can stay out in front and are a great pick in this matchup because of that. But Malagor going to be kind of flying a little bit forward here. He's got to be careful. If he gets focused by those handbows, he could take a lot of damage very quickly. But right now, Butcherbird just pursuing the kite a little bit. Again, playing it smart. And he has taken some damage on these Centaurs over on the far side. The Scourge Runners have a little bit longer range, so you've got to be careful as you're screening here which targets they're shooting at. Feral Manticore, cost-wise, isn't very expensive, but oof, nasty breath attack from Malekith. You see a little bit of Gaze of Malice here as well. So far, Hadriz playing this kite beautifully, really avoiding taking any unnecessary damage or committing to any melee whatsoever, but we see a little bit of a master action here. They start to get enveloped. Of course, the heavy mass of the Razor Gores will prevent them from escaping this, the one that's surrounded at the very least. Malagor also drops with his Manticore, so should be a nice pitched engagement developing here. We'll see if both players start to pour in some more resources. It looks like we do have one Manticore get enraged into the Cold One Knights in the backline. That is very unfortunate. But the Dark Riders move in here, and Malekith himself now jumps in with a huge Soul Stealer, trying to just bunker bust this entire position. Got a summoned Cygor coming in from Butcherbird, but looks like his support units are largely going to tear route here. That said, Malagor's not a complete pushover, and it looks like Malekith is trying to retreat. Focus fire from these throwing axes is pretty dangerous, along with the Manticore, and of course the Cygor moving into melee mode with Malekith is definitely a smart idea. Since he pulls away, Cygor can now, again, rely on the mass of these other units here, come in and just stomp these Masters. I mean, 3v1 single entity fights, this is way more than the Master can handle, and this guy's going to get absolutely pummeled, which is really no surprise, but let's see how it goes for the rest of the army, as Hadris starts to get a little bit caught up here, as he's kind of microing in this engagement, you know, pulling his expensive resources over here. It's kind of just taking this engagement, but it's honestly not going terribly for him as long as Scourge Runners, the Blackheart Corsairs, are able to get away, continue dealing some nice range damage. This Manticore just gets absolutely savaged by some shooting there. Cygor also, as it tries to pursue this pocket, just going to get dragged down. I mean, of course, this is Summon Cygor, so in a way that's actually good to absorb some of the ammunition there. But Soul Stealer popped over here as Malekith kind of fights right against the pond here of Blue Reach River. And in the trees, it's going to be heavily debuffed, whereas the Beastmen will primarily, I don't think any of their units actually, they all have Strider or Woodsman, so they won't be suffering any debuffs from the trees. Not exactly ideal for Malekith, but let's see, he's got a big power spike active with Murderous Prowess. Balance power slightly in favor of the Beastmen at this point, but Dark Elves are definitely punching back. There's a few engagements here where Centaurs get caught in a little bit more of a grind, and particularly with the heavily armored handbows here, who appear to be firing in melee as they try and move through this engagement. I don't know if they're even technically fighting in melee, but at the very least, all these units together is able to rout off a few Centaurs here. If these other Centaurs and Razorgors start to get routed off, then suddenly the Ungors are in a very vulnerable position. They can be just kited to death, cycle charged, whatever. But let's see here. Centaurs with throwing axes certainly still alive, and the Scourge Runner chariots are just about out of ammunition. Means they'll have to move into melee. So the Centaurs, meanwhile, have conserved a lot of their ammunition, but they're definitely taking losses, which means they're losing out on some of that value of the ammunition that hasn't been used. But it's a tough trade-off to try and make. Second Summon Cygor here is going to just throw rocks, or yeah, is this the first one? I don't think so. Yeah, only 97 value. I don't know. I'm really not a fan of summoning the Cygor to throw rocks. I think it's a crazy inefficient use of Winds of Magic. Like, you're better off, I think, to probably just spam Flock of Doom with Malagor. Honestly, I think the damage against multi-model units is going to be reliable. I think it's nice to have the Cygor summon to help in single entity melee fights, but for me, I don't really see it as like a true range unit summon. The time it lasts just not long enough unless you have a really expensive individual infantry unit, like in this matchup, something like a Blackguard. I just don't see it being worth the value to cast that spell in terms of the Winds of Magic costs. Anyway, chariots are going to be used in sort of a demi-anti-cavalry role, which is not exactly what they're meant for, but in great enough mass and against very tattered Centaurs with a little bit of Dark Rider support, they should be able to get it done. Now we do see some of that. Flock of Doom coming in. I mean, granted, there's not a lot of great units to really cast Flock of Doom here on, so yeah, just in terms of magic selection for Malagor, it's a little bit tough. You don't have that great of actual DPS options from him. There's no actual... I have to look at his spell loadout. Maybe we'll look at that in just a minute. Malekith drops in, though. It's going to put a quick tear route on those Centaurs. And we'll probably start to fast forward after a certain point, but the tables are going to be flipped a little bit here as the Centaurs have plenty of ammunition left and ability to kite here. And meanwhile, Hadris is going to be forced to pursue and try and catch these units and drag them down before they're able to drag down his high-value units. So, like, as soon as Malekith lands there, you see Butcherbird responds with the throwing axes, just conserving his ammo. He could maybe try and throw them at the chariots, but really, just saving it all for Malekith is probably the smartest thing to do, and that's exactly what he seems to be doing here, using the Centaurs in melee against the chariots, which is going to incur some losses, but this late in the game, the fact that the Centaurs have perfect vigor is going to be absolutely massive for them. In particular, the Drunken Bravado also providing a little bit of healing for the Groghooves mean that this is a very idealized engagement for them in sort of a late game situation. It'd be nice if they had a little bit more ammo, and Malekith does have a lot of HP left, might even have a Soul Stealer or two left for a hair more healing. But let's continue to fast forward as the Beastmen try and fight this out. Again, committing a little bit into melee here. I'm not sure at this point. Groghooves are out of ammo, right? So they can commit to melee here. These Centaurs ran a little far there, but definitely want to just stay close and use up the rest of their ammunition, try to throw at Malekith. I guess they do actually manage to break the one unit Corsairs there, but unfortunately just suffering leadership losses. I don't know. I think Butcherbird maybe was a little bit too conservative with his ammo there at the end and just tried to dump it as quickly as possible. that last unit of Centaurs with the throwing axes, but certainly a very fun matchup and ended up being quite close there at the end. But overall, very fun, interesting matchup for sure. Again, I don't know. Malagor is a little bit tough. I mean, I love the mobility of him. He's got decent enough combat stats with good micro. Basically uncatchable by the Dark Elves. You don't really have to worry about him getting sniped, but I just... his magic selection is not my favorite. We'll go ahead and take a look at that here in just a second. Malekith, on the other hand, is absolute force of nature. That's been well established. Scourge Runner Chariots actually underperform, which is very rare to see, but on the other hand, the Corsairs almost equal them in value, much higher kill total. I really like the combination of the two here, though, with this kind of counter, like kite with a couple counter attack tools. That's a classic method for kiting. But the Manticores also surprisingly didn't do a lot. I think I used to be a huge fan of Manticores in Warhammer 2 for a long time. I mean, there's a point where I put them in my top 5 worst monsters list. Shortly after that, they were significantly buffed. And they were very good for a long time. I don't know, though, how I feel about Manticores now. I'm starting to kind of turn on them a little bit. I mean, they're still very cost-effective in many situations, but they're not, with Ultra HP pools, they're not as good as they used to be, I feel like. But anyway. So if we go in here and grab Malagor, just take a look at his magic selection. So he does have Penumbral Pendulum. Okay, so I take that back. That's probably what... It's tricky, though, because it's basically the same, I mean, I guess one tier lower in terms of cost, but it is kind of a mid-tier cost spell. So, I don't know, maybe I would go with this. Savage Dominion, help with single entity fights, just to have the Cygor summon. It is certainly great if he does end up getting caught out by Malekith, or in other matchups where you might need to fight big, scary single entities. Just nice to have one extra to throw on the pile. Enfeebling Foe also helps with those specific high-value fights, can be used on units as well as heroes. And Penumbral Pendulum, I think, is just a little bit more of a reliable damage option. I don't know, Flock of Doom's okay as well, especially if you can cast it a lot of times on areas of units, infantry units in particular. But really, I mean, against Hadra's build, hindsight being 2020, it really wouldn't have been the most efficient means. If you could Penumbral Pendulum like a couple of those Corsair handbows, that might have significantly changed the sort of pace of that battle. But I don't know, I just, in that matchup, I'm not sure if I 100% love Malagor. I have to think through a little bit my Lord options. I'm certainly not a Beastman main by any means, but Aurochs is obviously very strong, but it does require you to take a caster alongside him. I'm personally really a big fan of lore of Wild right now. The Beastman's a unique lore of magic. Of course, you do have the Cygor summon here too if you want it, but then Traderkin really is a very strong direct damage spell. Definitely one I would be taking in most matchups these days. Also has, you know, Ray Scream, nice cheap damage spell, or you can take Valtide for a little bit more expensive. I don't know if this is super efficient right now, to be honest with you. But Traderkin really, as we have seen in a number of replays recently, is quite strong. Of course, Shadows is still very good. Death is also very efficient. So pretty much all your Lords of Magic are going to offer different things for you. Beasts actually can help you win fights straight up. Right now, the buffs and debuffs on Beasts is quite good. Like, Curse of Vonraer could give you a huge AoE buff, debuff effect. Debuff, I guess, really, for the enemy. But yeah, then you've got like Wisdom's Wild Form, Pan's Pelt that you can also throw in there situationally. Against Elves, because of their high combat stats, Curse of Vonraer can actually be quite nice. But anyway, I've rambled on long enough for this one. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again. See you next time.